In the last video, I've been talking about crisis in the sense of the crisis of the sciences and how that fit into the disciplines of neo-Kantianism, but especially into the way in which phenomenology under Edmund Husserl was formed. Now, that's going to be an important part of what's going on in Being in Time, but one of the things that makes Being in Time such an important book, even beyond these disciplinary contexts, is that Heidegger is going to connect this sense of crisis up with another sense of crisis that is acute in the 1920s and throughout the end of the 19th and early 20th century. Remember, this book is being written as I said, in 1927. And, we associate that time a lot of times, for example, in the United States with the Lost Generation, but in general with this rise of what we might call existentialism, a movement that Heidegger will be very closely associated with, and let's say a crisis in cultural or social meaning. Now, that crisis can take a lot of forms, and we're going to see it showing up a lot in the book. We're also going to see it a lot in the reception to the book as we get further in. But the question that I'm going to want to address in a couple, as we turn to section 4 of Being in Time, which is the Ontic priority of the question of being, is going to have to do with how he's going to connect these broader cultural or social crises up with the crisis of the sciences. And as we're going to see, this is going to be a sort of a very fraught moment in Heidegger, right? This is going to be where a lot of the charges of irrationalism come from. Arguably, this is going to connect him to the rise of fascism, which is going to seem a little bit odd right now, but we'll get into how that happens. Although, as we're going to see, the valence of this crisis can take a lot of forms. So how do we get from a crisis in the sciences to, let's say, this broader cultural science? Well, to understand that, we're going to have to shift and talk about this term ontic, right? So we've just seen Heidegger talk about the ontological priority of the question of being. And as I mentioned, the word ontology is a pretty ordinary philosophy word, just meaning the study of being. It comes from logos, right, which means study or a lot of things, and then ontos, which means being. Now, Heidegger will formulate the term ontic as its own term. I am a huge fan of the New York Times Spelling Bee app, right? And every time that the letters ONTIC come up and I can't spell ontic, I get angry. And I know I'm not alone in this because I gripe about it online and I see other folks too. It is a term that's used it's sort of formulated a few different places in philosophy. So you'll see it discussed in the philosophy of science. That's not relevant here. Heidegger's formulating it in his own sense. And he'll use it to mean. We'll see this show up, and this is going to be very important as the book progresses. He's going to reserve the word ontology for more and more for what we might call meta-ontology, a discussion of when people are actually explicitly doing what we would call ontology. But to the extent that we're always in some way engaging in questions around meaning, Heidegger is going to start to use the word ontic to refer to that. Now, what that means is going to sort of become clear as the book develops. What's going to be important for now is to notice that this is going to move us from talking about the kind of inquiry that science is into who it is that does sciences. That is to say, what does it mean to be the kind of person who engages in scientific inquiry at all? And let's just say not just scientific inquiry, but inquiry. Remember back in part 2, when we had talked about the priority of the question of being the reason why we had this gigantomachy in the first place, I had mentioned that Aristotle, or Heristotle as I was apparently going to call him, roots all of philosophy in the capacity to wonder, the ability to ask why. And so as we turn to what Heidegger is going to call the ontic priority of being, we're going to turn and ask this question: what does it mean to be the kinds of things that ask questions at all? Heidegger is going to use the term Dasein to describe that. That's a German term, and it's going to mostly be untranslated. So in the next video, I'll explain a little bit what Dasein is, because that's going to be very important as we get further into the book.